Welcome to Beyond the Music, the podcast where we dive into the lives and stories of people who shaped the world of music. I am Lena.
And I am Karina. We're both classically trained singers, and this podcast is our chance to explore the fascinating intersections of music, history, and humanity.
In our previous episode, we discussed the connection between Dmitri Shostakovich and Benjamin Britten. And today, we will be exploring a genre that sits somewhere between the intimate world of art song and the grand sound of the symphony orchestra, the orchestral song.
Oh, I love those.
Let's start with a simple question. What exactly is an orchestra song? Most listeners are probably familiar with the idea of a song accompanied by piano. In classical music, we often call this a Kunstlied, or in English, an art song. And I did also an episode about the Kunstlied, so you can listen back if you want to hear more about that. A singer performs poetry set to music, usually accompanied by piano. Think of composers like Schubert, Schumann, Brahms, or Wolf. The focus is often intimacy. It's almost like reading poetry aloud to a close friend. An orchestral song takes the same basic idea, a solo voice singing a poem, but replaces the piano with a full orchestra. Suddenly, the possibilities become much larger. Instead of 88 piano keys, the composer has an entire palette of colors available. Strings can create warmth. Woodwinds can paint nature. Brass can create triumph or terror. Percussion can add drama and atmosphere. The orchestra becomes an active storyteller. So, Karina, when you think about singing with piano versus singing with orchestra, what feels like the biggest difference for you as a performer?
Oh, definitely the overall feel of it. With piano, you do feel supported, but with orchestra, as soon as the orchestra starts, you actually feel the vibration in your feet. It's that powerful. I think that is the biggest difference, in my opinion.
Also, it's more like, I always say, orchestra is like a carpet under you. Like you can sit on it and with your voice and it like a magic carpet, a flying carpet, it takes you with them. With a piano, it's often way higher, way harder to, for example, sing a piano high note. With a piano, you have to prepare that like really lot more active, I think. With orchestra, it kind of comes natural. I have the feeling like that. So it's a little bit easier. It feels easier with an orchestra. So, if art songs already existed and opera already existed, why create orchestral songs? Well, composers in the 19th century were becoming increasingly interested in color and expression. The Romantic era loved emotions. Everything became larger, symphonies became larger, orchestras became larger, operas became larger. So naturally, composers started asking, what would happen if we gave the lead the same orchestral richness? The result wasn't opera. And that's an important distinction. In opera, a character is usually acting within a dramatic story. In an orchestral song, the singer often remains a narrator, reflecting on emotions, nature, philosophy, love, death, or memory. The song remains personal and poetic, even while the orchestra becomes enormous. Several composers experimented with orchestral songs, but one of the earliest important figures was Hector Berlioz. His cycle, Les Nuits d'été, which translate as Summer Nights, is often considered one of the first true orchestral song cycles. Written in the 1840s, it showed that orchestral accompaniment could deepen the emotional meaning of poetry rather than simply making it louder. But if there's one composer who truly transformed the orchestral song, it's probably Gustav Mahler.
Mm-hmm.
For Mahler, songs and symphonies were deeply connected. In fact, themes of travel between his songs and his symphonies. Sometimes a melody appears first in a song and later finds its way into a symphonic movement. For Mahler, these genres weren't separate worlds, they were connected. So, have you ever noticed how some Mahler songs almost feel like miniature operas or symphonies in themselves?
Oh, it's beautiful to sing them.
Yeah. Also, it's like his symphonies are, on the other hand, also really like voices sometimes. Like if you listen to the different instruments, he composes it like sometimes it sounds. It could also be singers, or choir.
Mm.
Um, Mahler is really impossible to ignore when talking about orchestral songs. Many of his most famous vocal works belong to this genre. One of the best known is Lieder eines fahrenden Gesellen, which translates to Songs of a Wayfarer. The cycle tells the story of a young man suffering from unrequited love. The emotions move between grief, longing, bitterness, and acceptance. It's essentially a heartbreak album from the 19th century.
Mm.
Then there is Des Knaben Wunderhorn. The title translates as the youth's magic horn. This isn't one cycle, but a large collection of songs based on German folk poetry. Some are humorous, some are satirical, some are deeply tragic, and many listeners will recognize ideas from these songs appearing later in Mahler's symphonies. And now we arrive at perhaps the most famous orchestral song cycle of all, Kindertotenlieder.
Mm.
This title translates to Songs of the Death of Children. The texts were written by the poet Friedrich Rückert after the death of two of his children. As you can imagine, they are devastating. The songs don't depict dramatic outbursts of grief. Instead, they explore sorrow in a surprisingly restrained way. The pain often feels quiet, almost numb, which somehow makes it even more heartbreaking. And there's a tragic detail connected to this cycle. Mahler composed these songs while his own children were alive. Later, his daughter Maria died at the age of 4. After her death, many people looked back at Kindertotenlieder and felt the work had become almost prophetic. Another giant of the orchestral song is Richard Strauss. Strauss had an extraordinary gift for orchestrations. His songs often sound luxurious, almost cinematic. Perhaps his most famous orchestral songs are the 4 last songs. They were written near the end of his life and published after his death. The texts deal with aging, farewell, peace, and ultimately death. But unlike Kindertotenlieder, they are not tragic in the same way. There is sadness, yes, but also acceptance, even serenity. This final song, Im Abendrot, which means at sunset, ends with one of the most beautiful questions in all music. Ist dies etwa der Tod? Which translates to, could this perhaps be death? And Strauss doesn't present death as frightening. Instead, it feels peaceful, almost like coming home. What I find fascinating about orchestral songs is that they combine the strength of two worlds. They keep the intimacy and poetry of the lead, but they add the immense color palette of the orchestra. A piano can suggest a storm, and an orchestra can create one. A piano can suggest a sunrise. An orchestra can make you feel as though you're standing inside it. Karina, if you could perform any orchestra song cycle tomorrow, which one would you choose and why?
I only can choose one?
Yeah.
Oh, this is a very hard question because I've done quite a few of them already. Not with orchestra, only with piano, but I really can't answer. I mean, yeah, I really can't because there's so many beautiful ones.
For me, it would be the 7 early songs of Alban Berg.
Oh.
I did them already a lot of times with piano, never with orchestra. Would love that. It's so beautiful with the orchestra. Also, it's not a big orchestra like in a lot of Mahlers. It's a little bit smaller orchestra. So because it's also for a soprano, it gets quite deep. So a lot of mezzo do that also. But so because it's in the middle range, it's easier if the orchestra is not that full. There's just one song which goes to up to an A, and the others are all underneath. So let's finish with a few fun facts. After all the sad story about the Kindertotenlieder. Many orchestra songs actually started live as piano songs and were orchestrated later, sometimes by the composer, sometimes by somebody else. Mahler often conducted orchestras while composing his song, so he knew exactly how every instrument behaved and how to achieve specific colors. So he just had an orchestra to try out stuff. And although orchestral songs are now standard repertoire, they can be surprisingly difficult to perform. The singer has to project text clearly while competing with a full orchestra. Finding that balance is an art in itself. The orchestra song occupies a unique place in classical music. It isn't quite opera, it isn't quite symphony, and it isn't quite lied. Instead, it sits beautifully between those worlds. It allows composers to explore deeply personal emotions while using some of the richest musical colors imaginable. And through composers like Berlioz, Mahler, and Strauss, the genre gave us some of the most moving music ever written. I hope you enjoyed orchestra songs as much as we did. If you liked this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.
Next time, we'll delve into another fascinating chapter of music history. Until then, keep listening and discovering the stories beyond the music. See you next time.